Back here for another episode of the Stephanie Gaitley Show. Raf Elia and Coach Stephanie Gaitley. We're recapping the previous week for Fordham where they had a week off and then beat Davidson on the road. First of all, that game against Davidson, coming off the week off, you said you weren't sure if it was just the fatigue resting the players or if it was just going to take you out of a little bit of a rhythm. You weren't a big fan of the way the practices went leading up until Davidson. So what was your overall evaluation for the trip in general?
I mean, anytime you get a win on the road, I think it's good. You know, I was proud of the kids to respond well from I didn't feel two very effective practices. So I think the kids responded well to it. And Davidson had been playing well. Davidson had their lowest scoring game in their last 5 games was 68. So to hold them to 45 on their home court, you know, even though we didn't shoot particularly well, I thought was a great effort.
Well, it was defensive. It was scrappy from both sides, but where your team had the difference was on the glass, and it was out rebounding them by almost double. Well, I think by double, with Jamaris Davis leading the way, of course, over there with 21 rebounds. And that was a point of emphasis you made in practice and leading up to that game.
Absolutely. They had to out-rebound us the last time we played here in January, and so obviously we hammered home that point, and there was a point of emphasis for that in practice. So on both ends, you know, on the defensive end, on the offensive end, and I think we responded well to the challenge.
Lauren Holden was 4 for 5 from downtown, and the team as a whole shot well from beyond the arc as opposed to in the field. But it was really Lauren Holden for the entire first half commanding the offense from beyond the arc. Where did she find that groove?
I think Lauren's done a great job of picking her spots, you know, of reading ball screens. She's done a much better job of reading ball screens. And because teams obviously put a lot of attention towards G, it means that if we can get the ball out and reverse it quickly, then we'll have easy opportunities, and I think she capitalized on those opportunities.
She's been shooting a lot better from the field in conference play. She has those slides last season as well where she's not shooting as well from downtown, even though you know in practice she could shoot probably 10 for 10 just in practice alone from beyond the arc. But now in conference, she's really starting to be more consistent, around 40% shooting from beyond the arc in conference play. Is there a difference in her game? Is she just being a little more aggressive, more patient?
It's a combination of a lot of things. You know, probably the extra work she puts into it, a combination of with Mary being back, you can't leave somebody open, you know. So, you know, when Zara was in, Zara's more of a defensive player, so you could cheat off and kind of plug the lane. And with having 5 people that can really spread the defense out, and, you know, with Joey, she's sometimes a reluctant shooter, but obviously she nailed a big 3 for us in that Davidson game. When you have to defend everybody, it will open some things up.
And then you mentioned Zara Gilling. She played 22 minutes that game. Kendall Jeremiah only played a little bit. Is that something that was just a matchup thing with Davidson? Because I know Zara played a lot when you played Davidson back at the Rose Hill Gym as well. So is that just a matchup you like, or is that something we're going to see a lot more as we get into A10s?
I mean, good, better, and different. If you come in, like Kendall came in, had an early turnover, and just in my mind, like I can't wait for turnover number 2 and turnover number 3. So I kind of base it on that. If I need offense, I'm going to Kendall. If I need defense, I'm going to Zara. So we, had a lead, and so really what we need to do was protect the lead. So therefore, it warranted Zara being on the court more.
Jamaris Davis, when she gets on those tears, I've noticed it's not always either or rebounds or points, but there have been a few games this season where she's made up for maybe not having as big of a point total by just being a maniac on the glass. Is that something that you'd like to see more from her, maybe combined with some more assists as you mentioned in the past, or are you just happy with her getting into a double-digit score line or rebound line, however she could help the team?
G and I had this conversation a couple weeks ago because I felt like she was forcing a lot of shots, and she's got to trust in her teammates because we have kids that can score. And I think, Davidson is a great example of how effective she can be without scoring. And she didn't. I think she was 3 for 13 that game and didn't shoot particularly well, but she was able to be a factor on the boards. And I think that's a part of growth and maturity in her game of not continuing to force shots. Find the open person. If you're double, hit the open person. If not, you can get on the glass on both ends. I mean, in Rhode Island, she had 8 offensive rebounds, and I think that had a lot to do with her success. So I think hopefully down the stretch, she's realizing that she can be a factor, whether it's in the scoring column or on the boards.
That game obviously riddled with a little bit of a turnover issue on both sides, But from your side, what did you see more often than not as the main problem with turnovers, especially in the first half where you were pretty animate on the bench after a couple of the turnovers?
I just, I get frustrated with unforced turnovers and just silly turnovers. There was a couple that we were trying to feed the post, and the passes had no chance. We, and I consider a bad shot a turnover. Like I broke down tape with Bree. I thought Bree forced a couple shots, and which, it's going to happen at the end of the shot clock, but they were early shots in the shot clock. And so I told her, you had people open next to you. These are shots I don't see you taking in practice, so why are we taking them in games and trying to make things happen that aren't there? So, that's what I do the individual tape session with the kids. We do team tape session, and I do individual tape session for them to grow from watching these situations and to help us down the stretch run.
And we don't get to talk about this part of just the travel and the teams in general, but we mentioned team chemistry. And before that game, the day before, we were over Bree Kavanaugh's family's house over in Davidson, and you mentioned that it might be kind of like a home game because Davidson didn't bring a lot of a crowd, and behind us was a whole bunch of just Fordham crowds because that family brought about 30. Obviously, Haley Gillis is from North Carolina. So when you talk about not just team chemistry, the families coming out, especially now getting into A10 time where you're going to have to go neutral site, how big is that impact on the team?
That was big for us. With Haley and Raylene both playing on the same high school team, they brought a great crowd, and their coaches brought a great crowd, and their families brought a great crowd. And, of course, Bree's family. It was such a nice evening. Anytime you can go to somebody's home and be welcomed the way we were welcome to have a home-cooked meal. Bree's mom, the food was fantastic, and just the way that we were embraced in the family was fantastic. So I think anytime you can do that, that just adds, especially as you hit the stretch run and you're kind of in February and everybody's tired and everybody's kind of beat up. And so now it's so important that we just kind of have a lot of maintenance at this point. But having that crowd was outstanding on the road because we certainly aren't going to see that in our last two games. So I thought that was very beneficial for us.
And then another thing happening just before we were about to leave back for the Bronx, and that was Duquesne falling to St. Joseph's at home. They dropped now to 10-2, so you guys are tied in terms of conference record at number 2. How big, first of all, would that first round bye be, or would you just be okay with being able to play that first round game, keep yourselves in a little bit of the mojo?
You just hit it on the head. I'm not sure. Because, I know GW last year, they lost the first game on that Friday after having that bye, and they didn't like having that much time off. It was just too much of a gap. So it could play out either way. At this point, there's too much left. We have 4 really big games left before we even determine where the rankings are. Last year, I remember in our LaSalle game, there was 3 or 4 games that were going to dictate how the seedings kind of fell into place. So right now, we obviously use that as a motivator that we're in second place and can make a run for first depending on what happens with Dayton. But at this point, we're just focused on taking one day at a time.
And we're going to take a look at that game against Dayton and then against Duquesne when I talk to you in a little bit. But first, let's go on the court. Actually, we're going to go a little bit courtside. Surprise coming up. Joined by assistant SID Ryan Uhlich and video coordinator Chris Scerbo. Guys, we've been planning this for a while. Not planning it, we've been talking about it for a while, so great to have you guys with us today.
Thanks for having us on, Raf. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I know. It's a bit. Ryan especially has been for like a year.
I've been waiting for this invitation for a long time.
He's been begging,
Good
almost,
to be on.
some might say.
Good to be on.
But first, I'll let you guys, for the crowd out there, I'll let you guys give a description of what you guys do so they know who you guys are, because you're more behind the scenes. Usually we go with the players on the court. You guys know them. You've seen them. You've watched them. These guys are a big deal, at least to us here in the media, but even to the team as well. So what do you guys do individually?
So I'm in charge of the film exchange. For anyone not familiar with the way that Division I college basketball works, we film every game, and then we're also supposed to share the film with the other schools, supply it to the coaching staff, supply it to the players as well. So I'm in charge of that, helping distribute all of that to the coaches and the players, as well as doing some video for social media as well.
I'm in charge of basically all communication for the team. I got a big help from Chris and Abigail for social media, for the marketing purposes, but everything you're reading on the website, press releases, game day tweets, that's all me, stat upkeep, everything like that. And media relations is a big part of the team too. pitching stories, local, national news and media.
The face behind the Fordham Rams women's basketball Twitter account, Ryan Uhlich. So we've talked about that a couple times throughout the episode. So now you put a face to the name. So first and foremost, just in terms of traveling with the team, obviously both of you have just been with the team this entire season, just not only just traveling with them for most games, if not all games, being with them on practices, and obviously, Ryan, you deal with a lot of the numbers and a lot of the nitty-gritty stuff, and a lot of keeping track of the career stats, the career headlines. And Chris, obviously, you've gone through a lot of video with this team, as well as seeing them in practice. So what would you describe as your just relationship, your knowledge of the team in general?
So I mean, I'm here every day, 9 to 5, at every practice, at every game. So, yeah, it's been great so far as a member of the staff. So I love it.
Same. I mean, I'm not at every practice, but occasionally I'll come in, talk to Frank, talk to Chris, see the team. But no, I travel everywhere, home and away. I'm there, and I mean, I love this team. It's my second season with the team, and I love traveling, especially the foreign tour we just went with in the summer. That was awesome.
And now, just breaking you guys down a little bit individually here, Chris, we've mentioned this on the Gaitley Show. Actually, Coach Gaitley has mentioned this to us a little bit, that you've been assembling, as well as what you have to do for your job, just assembling some other highlight tapes for Coach herself when she wants to motivate. I know she mentioned Kendall Haramai, she had you put together a highlight tape for her to see where she can go. So how much do you feel like that your work is impacting the team in that kind of a way?
Oh, I think absolutely it makes a difference. Coach is very hands-on with video and using it to demonstrate the potential of our student athletes, and we've used it several times. You mentioned Kendall, Joanna Klug as well. We've used it. So yeah, it's a big part so far of the day-to-day operation of the team.
And Ryan, we brought this up on trips before. You're right behind Coach or to her side for a good percentage of the game. The entire game, and she's not the kind of coach that just focuses on the court. She likes to bark at not just the bench, but you as well. So what's that relationship like when it is game time? What does she go to you for?
I'm lucky she doesn't bark at me in a negative way. She'll just be like, "What's G shooting from the line?" or something like that. If someone's struggling a little bit, she wants to know so that she can she can remind them next time they come out. She can be like, focus, everything like that. I mean, first of all, I love watching Coach. She's a phenomenal coach, great player coach. What the things she says right in front of me are great. She's really insightful and very calm and steady. And Ange too, and Sonia, and everyone right there. They always have a good game plan pretty much every time. So that relationship is good. She's always just asking me for percentages, numbers, anything she wants me to know. Fouls are a big thing because even though there are certain people on the bench that can tell her who has how many fouls or whatever, I'll usually be the first one to shout out because I'm right next to her, and I keep track of I keep the book on the road games, and I can tell her how many fouls somebody has, or if they have 5 fouls or 4 fouls, whatever. So it's very important. There was Mason. They didn't have room for me because they put you guys right next to Coach, so they had to put me behind. I was in the first row of the stands, and I was trying to flag down Steph and Ange. I was like, I'm right here. If you need anything, ask me, But no, I love being next to Coach on game days. Big part of it.
And now going into late season, we were mentioning this with Coach, that there's a lot of paying attention, not just to the team this entire season. It's probably been more just team-centric. Pay attention to the other team in terms of what you have to, series history, all that kind of stuff. So for your job now, it has to be a little bit more paying attention to how these other teams are doing in the Atlantic 10.
Mm-hmm.
Is that exciting, or is that busy work now? Is that get you a little bit more? That put a little more on
Gets
your
me
plate?
jacked up.
Yeah.
No, I mean the first year I did it, it was exciting because I was new to it, and then now it's kind of just par for the course. It's kind of like the coaches are constantly like, "What do we need to get a secure first round bye? What kind of things do you need?" And sometimes I might need help because it's a little complicated the way things work. I talk to the A10 all the time.
Well, what is the tie-breaking procedure in the Atlantic 10? Because right now it's Duquesne and Fordham, 10-2.
Yeah, 10-2. Dayton's running away with the first place seed, but still a few games to go. It is, I believe, overall winning percentage first, or maybe it's a head-to-head.
Head-to-head, I
Yeah, I
believe.
think it's head-to-head.
Yeah.
So it's head-to-head, and then it's then it goes. It's interesting. I've never seen it before, but it goes if it's a tie head-to-head. If you play each team twice and it's win-loss, then it goes against in order how you fared against the teams in conference head to head, and that's it. So I never really concern myself with beyond that. It's usually no one's going to tie 1 through 13 or whatever against the other teams, but so I believe that's the tiebreaker.
Yeah, and then Chris, obviously you've been paying attention to, and video tells a lot. When they go prepping for a game, they're devouring tape on how they do it. So from your perspective now, this is a team that was so young, so many young players. Focus now real quick on Bree Kavanaugh, because she's been probably the standout of this team this season, just because of nature of her coming in as a redshirt freshman, not sure how she was going to play, and now she's averaging 20 points almost per game. So how have you seen her development?
It's an incredible development. It's been a pleasure to watch her play since last year when I was manager on the team. And on our highlight tapes, been a lot of Bree clips. So it's been
and that's a good sign.
Yeah, always a good sign when you show up on the highlights a lot. So.
And then my last question, in terms of how this team is doing, obviously they've been a surprising team in the A-10, probably the surprise of the A-10 when you consider they were picked 5th preseason, and here they are trying to challenge for an A-10 regular season title and might challenge for an A-10 championship. So when you came into this season looking at how this team was supposed to perform, obviously you both have to have some kind of idea of what your job is going to be like moving into this season, because of how the team is. It kind of impacts how your job is going to be run throughout the season. How has that just been in terms of the timeline of, okay, now this team is starting to be legit?
Well, to be honest, I think from the very start of the season, this is right where we expect it to be. I think anything other than competing for a conference title would have been somewhat of a disappointment. But it's definitely exciting getting ready for looking ahead to the postseason, and going to be a lot of film getting broken down in a short amount of time. So, but it's great right now. This is March Madness is coming up, so can't ask for anything more.
Definitely one of the surprise stories of the conference season. I think the other coaches didn't really know what to expect completely from the team, because they saw what happened. What was last year? You graduate 3 seniors, you lose 2 others, and most of the firepower we have aside from G this year and Lauren and Mary are freshmen. They're new faces to the other coaches. So they picked us to finish 5th, I think, out of respect for coach and out of who was still here. But I think a bit of a surprise for everyone once they saw Bree get going and some of the other freshmen contribute. So it's been really great to see them. And I know Coach laments the early season jitters and everything, because those are winnable games, she always says, the Albany, Boston College games, whatever. But, otherwise, this team is steadily growing, and I think getting better at the right time.
And taking care of business in conference play, which is, of course, that's the season right there. My last question is going to be about the namesake of the show, Coach Gaitley. Obviously, she runs the program on and off the court in probably the most unique way you could ask for at Fordham in the NCAA. And part of what we do when we travel, it's there's part of it is just having a good time. And she likes to make sure the team this is college. This is about not just growing as an athlete for her, but growing as a person. So in terms of FUV, and we've obviously had a relationship with you guys as well, because we come to you guys for a lot in terms of what we have to do for our job. So what I'll ask you guys, and we have our own memories with Coach at WFUV, but for you guys, what's the memory that sticks out to you in terms of Coach, in terms of travel, whatever comes to mind?
Well, the first thing that pops into my mind is we went on a fantastic foreign tour this summer. I'm sure you've seen it on social media.
I've heard about it.
Yeah. But just that whole experience and the opportunity that Coach afforded us with the sites that we saw and the team bonding and staff bonding that went on during that trip definitely stands out to me. Rome, Barcelona, all these cities, it was just amazing.
Which one was your favorite?
Barcelona.
Yeah, Barcelona.
Barcelona.
Yeah, definitely.
And Rome for me too.
Yeah.
What about you?
I mean, no specific memories, because she's always even keel and steady along the way, just being great, being who she is. I love her idea for the Coach G show, catching up with Coach G. So you would find us, and we packed so many into this foreign trip with all of her family members that were on the trip and staff. Did you do one over there? No, you did one here.
I did it here.
You did it here. But we had so many of those shows, and we're like a half hour outside of Milan in a hotel, and we're in the lobby just shooting catching up with Coach G episode, and she's just firing them off after a long day of travel, nothing ever happened, nothing bothering her. Those are always great memories, and just, I mean, the whole trip was wonderful, and I love the idea of the trip every 4 years. I wish I could have been there for Oceania when they went to New Zealand and Fiji and everything, but this was awesome to get back to Italy and Spain.
And obviously a lot more to go as they travel to Dayton this coming weekend. It's going to be a longer trip for us. Have a bye day, I guess, on Saturday, and then with
Three-day
A10,
weekend.
yeah, and then with A10 tournament coming up, traveling to Richmond, might be there for a while and maybe beyond. Last season it was the WNITs. Who knows about this season? So could be a lot more memories made as we get into this, and we're going to get into more against Dayton and Duquesne with Coach Gaitley. Back with Coach Gaitley, we're going to look ahead now to the week ahead for the Fordham Rams. They have a couple of big games coming up, playing Dayton on Sunday in Ohio, and then taking on Duquesne on next Wednesday in Pittsburgh. So not just two big games, two big road games. So when you look at those games, you've already played Dayton, but obviously these are two games that you've had to have circled for the entirety of the season, and those circles have probably just gotten bigger as you've seen where you were going to be toward the end of the season.
Don't put a lot of time into it till they get there. I mean, we obviously know what's at the end of the season. I mean, because when you start the season, you don't know. I mean, we were so young, you know, you don't know where we're going to be. Now, obviously, every game becomes of paramount importance because of where it'll seed you and where it'll put you. So, you know, for us, you know, right now our number one concern is taking care of our home court, and then we'll worry about being on the road against Dayton. Obviously, Dayton's undefeated, and so nobody's beaten them there. You know, we liked that challenge when we went to George Mason because they hadn't been beaten at home. So our kids, I think, thrive on that challenge. And then, obviously, it's been proven that Duquesne can lose at home because they just lost to St. Joe's. So, you know, I think our kids will definitely be ready for those challenges.
And now let's look ahead to that Dayton game. Dayton just played a game on ESPNU against George Washington in GW, and GW almost pulled that one out late, but it was Dayton holding on to win that game, staying undefeated. Part of what GW did toward the fourth quarter was switch between the 2-3 zone and man, and it was really throwing Dayton off. Is that something that you'd consider or have looked at?
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's served us well in certain games. I think it just depends. Like, if we are having success with our man, then we'll stay with man. If we're struggling one way or another, then we'll mix in zone. A lot of it depends on foul trouble. It depends on, are we getting hurt inside or outside? So a lot of it just depends on what are factors involved, which will dictate what we do.
Every conference has, it seems, that team that everyone looks at and says it's going to be a really tough one. But when you look at this Dayton side, considering that you played them to within a point last time at the Rose Hill Gym, considering that GW brought them down to the wire, is this a team that you believe your team knows is beatable?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think, you know, with our kids, I mean, there's a big difference mindset-wise this year as compared to last year. Like, last year, I think there was a gap. And, you know, and even though I think we were competitive, I still think there was a gap. I don't think there's any doubt in anybody's mind that we can win it all. I mean, obviously, Dayton is the front runner and the one to beat. They're well coached. They've got a veteran squad. They got a great point guard, well balanced, you know. So, you know, obviously it's a difficult challenge for us. But, I mean, we proved here, I think, you know, we should have beat them here. I think we had the game and we let it go. But at the same time, you know, it's anybody's game. And I like the fact that we're playing St. Louis twice and Dayton twice. They're two of the better teams in the conference, and therefore it tells us exactly where we stand, and it tells the respect that we have as a program that they want to play us against the best teams.
How much of a combination are you going to be looking for that previous Dayton game and then that game against St. Louis on the road? Because, again, a top of the A10 team in St. Louis that you beat at the Rose Hill Gym and played them tough on the road. Dayton team, you played them tough here at the Rose Hill Gym, and now you have to go play them on the road. How much of a combination is it in terms of attitude for the both games?
Well, I think our kids know. I mean, went into double overtime and lost without G. And I think our kids realize that we can beat people. And I think the last time we played Dayton, Mary had just gotten cleared, and what certainly was about 50%. And I think we've seen in the last couple of games the factor Mary is with our team. I think she's obviously our X factor and makes a big difference for us. So I think that comes into play both from an offensive standpoint and a defensive standpoint for us.
And every game is just another game that stands between you and a win. But how much do you think the team is just going to play to the opponent in terms of Dayton? And I mean that in a way that they know that this is a big game on the road, a team that has to have left a sour taste in their mouth from when they were here in the Bronx.
Yeah, they certainly remember that, and I think just the crowd we faced against St. Louis, the crowd we faced against George Mason, I think our kids have done a great job of blocking out all the external, the things that could be a problem for us. That was my biggest concern, is how the young kids are going to react to, just the crowd. And, because I know even at home when we played Davidson on field trip day, I know Bree was a little shook by the crowd. And so therefore I'm like, okay, that was a home situation. What happens when we go to field trip day at St. Louis? And I anticipate a great crowd at Dayton, but we've done well with distractions. We've done a good job of keeping things within the lines, and we realize it's a 40-minute game, and Dayton jumped out on us quick the last game, but we're able to counter that and kept our composure. So I anticipate a very hard-fought, tough game in Ohio.
Is the way your team has played on the road for this entire season not just surprising, but this is a team that struggled on the road last season, a more experienced team. Now it's a much younger team. Is it surprising to you that they're playing so well on the road, or is it just a matter of, well, it's a young team, they're coming in, every game is just a game that they're still freshmen in?
I think you hit it on the head. I think sometimes with freshmen, they don't know what to expect. So sometimes I've always thought, oh, let's have a home game with a young team, and then you realize sometimes there's that pressure of all the people being there, seeing them, and you're better off being on the road. And I think this team has proven that. I mean, we lost early, at Albany. We lost early at BC. I think our kids would love to have had those games back. I think they would be different outcomes with the way we're playing now. But I think they were also great learning experience to put us in the position of where we are now.
Kavanaugh, career high, 34 points against Dayton when they were here. What did you see from her in that game that you think is easy or plausible for her to just replicate when she plays them again?
It's funny you say. I was talking to my youngest son, Coop, Jordan, who plays at Richmond, and he said, Mom, I think there's just a difference of this team for you this year as opposed to last year because of Bree. Because Bree just presents, G had to carry so much of the load, and Lauren was a scorer, but not somebody that can really create their own shot. Where Bree can create her own shot and get other people's shots. So now you have somebody else you have to worry about offensively, and she can get past people. So she's explosive. So I think, with Bree, I think, like I said, she didn't shoot particularly well against Davidson, but then you look in the numbers and she led us with 19. And there was a couple I thought she forced, and we talk about that, but that's part of youth and inexperience and just kind of learning the game and trying to, kind of help her grow with the game. So she's only going to get better with that, but she's a gamer. I mean, she wants the ball. I mean, you look at her back at St. Louis when she had 37s, like, she wants to silence the crowd. She wants to be the one that takes the big shot and in the big times, and I think, I have no doubt that she's going to want that when we hit Dayton.
And then when you go against Duquesne in Pittsburgh, how much of a disparity is there between Dayton and Duquesne? Are these two teams that are record-wise, obviously, 2 more losses to Duquesne, but are they skill-wise just right there with each other, or is there a decent drop-off?
I mean, I think anybody can beat anybody on any given night, and I think the scores in the conference have proven that. I just think, Duquesne, another well-coached team, another well-balanced team. I mean, they've just got a lot of weapons. They got a really solid point guard, a very good shooting 2 guard, a defensive tough kid at 3, and solid 4 and 5, solid bench. They're a hard matchup. So, no, I don't think that there is a gap. I think, on any given day, anybody can beat anybody in our conference.
And then my last question is going to be now with you having to wait for results and the team having to wait for results of these other sides, and depending on how the game goes against Dayton and Duquesne, that could be just even more fascinating to watch. Are you happy that that's the case? You like your team watching these teams going into A-10s, watching them play, keeping an eye on what they're doing, or would you just prefer no distraction, black out their cell phones?
No, I mean, I think it shows their interest. I love the fact that they care enough. I've had kids before that don't know what other teams. I love the fact that they're talking about that. And it's like, wow, St. Joe's beat Duquesne. And it tells me how into it they are. I mean, to me, that's not a distraction. But again, at the same time, we control our own destiny. So we can't worry about what other people are doing. We got to really take care of our own business.
Coach, thank you very much. Things are getting intense here in the Atlantic 10. Fordham, number 3, number 2, tied with Duquesne. Is trying to go up against the Dayton Flyers on Sunday, undefeated Dayton. So that's going to be a good game. That's going to be on WFBsports.org. Hold up. Davis on the break all the way.
To say the word Pandora. It's a great first name, but she is now gone. Marie Kavanaugh is a name we'll be seeing on this year, first season with the Rams.